Ahsoka is finally finished, Thrawn and Ezra are back in our normal galaxy, and Dave Filoni's movie is ready to rock and roll. The Star Wars community is in shambles, and no one seems to agree on anything. So what did this season do to fix the Star Wars fandom, if anything? It doesn't seem like everyone is back on track with Dave Filoni and Ahsoka. In today's video, my aim is to convince you of the fact that Ahsoka really isn't about Ahsoka. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed these 8 episodes of Star Wars goodness. However, the funniest thing about it is that Ahsoka is kind of the least interesting character in her own show. Hello, my name is Eli Hollingsworth, and I'm just here reminding everybody that teenagers can think deeply as well. Today, we're thinking deeply about Ahsoka. Now, before we get into my thoughts about Ahsoka, it's important to understand the current state of the Star Wars community. The Star Wars community has gotten the reputation of being unfriendly, extreme, toxic, divisive, ludicrous, insane, or just downright unbearable. Are all Star Wars fans like this? Obviously some are. I'm not nearly arrogant enough to make assumptions about an entire people group, so I would never go as far to say that all are, but sure, there are a few. But are there more angry or toxic Star Wars fans than there are in other fandoms? I don't know. I will say anyone who scrolls through a Star Wars subreddit or comment section can find out one thing that all Star Wars fans, true Star Wars fans, have in common, and that is that all of them are passionate. All Star Wars fans are extremely passionate, and I can say that being a Star Wars fan myself. Star Wars has been around for almost 50 years and had such a monstrous impact on generations. Star Wars fans are imaginative dreamers and creators who witnessed the stories of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and the rebellion fighting against the evil Empire and the likes of Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, and expanded their minds to escape from their mundane everyday lives into a magical land of fantasy, mythology, thrilling, mind-blowing action, and at the center of it, a whole lot of heart. Everyone who loves Star Wars has every right to be passionate about it. Once you've seen the incredible adventures of the original trilogy and the prequels, they become yours. You take ownership of the stories and adventures, and no one can take them away from you. So, naturally, when Disney makes a movie like The Last Jedi, which the director has said multiple times on record, had the sole intention of disrupting everything fans knew about the story, turning it on its head, and changing everything everyone knew about everything, people are gonna be upset. Now, is it warranted for fans to go around spewing hate and cruelty towards those who disagree with them? Obviously not. But listen, if someone's being mean to you on the internet, what do you do? It's their problem, not yours, is what I say. The Disney sequel trilogy offended a lot of people. Aside from Rogue One, which might be the best movie Disney has ever put out in Star Wars, a sizable audience got turned off and lost passion in the beloved brand. Then came The Mandalorian. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau cooked just the right amount of old while having just enough new to create something that brought everyone back. And boy did they cook. Pulling from the influences that inspired George Lucas's original stories and from popular spaghetti westerns, The Mandalorian's lone wolf and cub story of Din Djarin and Grogu captured our hearts and lit our fires for 2 seasons. In season 2, they brought back the legendary fan favorite Boba Fett and gave him his own spin-off show, which released in 2021. In 2020, we got the 7th and final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars, an animated show from a decade past that, since Disney acquired Lucasfilm, was believed to be dead and gone. Fans saw it to be the perfect ending to the beloved show. Star Wars was back, and if you didn't like it, you would be thrown into the Sarlacc pit along with the other non-believers. That was, of course, until we got that Boba Fett spin-off show. Boba Fett, a masked, fearless mercenary who held such mystery and presence, was reduced to an old, slow teddy bear who took his helmet off every 2 seconds just wanting someone's respect. Half the show was just continuing the stories of Din Djarin and Grogu for no reason. That's okay though, right? I mean, Kenobi promised the ultimate rematch of the century between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, even if it maybe kind of broke canon. I mean, we were still interested to see more of the 2 most central characters in the entire saga. The promise of an epic rematch and the examination of the relationship between 2 broken Jedi was revealed to be nothing but a meager, uneventful showcase of the shakiest camera I have ever seen, stupid, silly filler episodes that didn't make any sense, some pretty lame lightsaber battles, an irritating young Princess Leia, and an Inquisitor that nobody asked for or nobody wanted. Speaking of someone no one wanted or cared about, next up we had Andor, which, surprisingly, might be some of the best Star Wars television I've ever seen. From the creators of the Bourne trilogy, Andor surprised just about everyone in bringing so many interesting and complex characters into the Star Wars universe that make good and bad choices. For the first time in Star Wars history, it was no longer light versus dark. Andor brought the bright, colorful universe down to a molecular level and took a huge dive into the muddiest moral waters the franchise has ever seen. Good guys were killing people, just shooting them in the face, and it made sense. Sure, it was divisive and it did turn off a lot of fans, and that's perfectly fine. But to me, it was phenomenal. Although I and a few other fans really enjoyed Andor, it can sadly continued Star Wars' downward spiral in the public eye. In between these were sprinkled animated shows like Tales of the Jedi, The Bad Batch, and Star Wars Visions, which were received warmly by most fans, but then we come to The Mandalorian Season 3. One of the silliest and most pathetic seasons of television I have ever seen in my life. The highly anticipated and long-awaited return of the beloved show after 3 years was utterly disappointing. Was Star Wars dead? I mean, what seemed to be the only thing keeping it alive, The Mandalorian, wasn't good enough. What's the problem? There have been countless rumors of behind-the-scenes drama between President of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and the creators of recent Star Wars projects, which, can be supported by a quick Google search on how many projects have been announced by Star Wars and actually came to be. Countless directors signed on to create a Star Wars project only to butt heads with Kathleen Kennedy and throw the whole thing into question. Is that the issue? I believe it's a mixture of a few things, maybe not just that, but I don't believe it's my place to say for sure. Either way, Star Wars fans are angry, confused, and upset about at least one thing that's released in the past few years. Real quick, I do want to say, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. You know why you subscribe? Because the value of it is you get to check out my videos as soon as they come out. It's just really easier. Like if you're seeing my videos in your recommended feed, it's just easier to go ahead and subscribe so you can see them as soon as they come out and you don't have to wait and be later down the line. I'm much more likely to respond to comments when they're earlier when the video posts. So if you want to subscribe and turn on notifications, you can be some of the first to see my videos, and it's just accessible. So you don't have to. I'm not going to make you do anything. But if you do enjoy this content, I would really appreciate it, and it really does help me out. And also leave a like if you enjoyed this video. And if you didn't enjoy it, be sure to leave a dislike also. That brings us to Ahsoka. Fans still trusted in Dave Filoni, writer and creator of Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars The Clone Wars, co-creator of The Mandalorian, and he was personally mentored by George Lucas. In some people's minds, Dave Filoni is the last hope for Star Wars. Ahsoka directly follows up the series finale of Star Wars Rebels, in which Ezra Bridger and Thrawn. Ezra sacrificed himself to stop Grand Admiral Thrawn, and they both were zipped away by the Purrgil space whales to an unknown location. I was especially excited to see where this story was going to lead, where we will find Ezra, find Thrawn, two fantastic characters. As the season progressed, though, one thing became very clear to me. Ahsoka isn't totally about Ahsoka. Sure, her name is the title of the show, she has a sizable amount of screen time. Although the lesson is learned through her eyes and personified through her actions, the message is much greater. It's really about Anakin. Hayden Christensen returned to the role of Anakin after being bullied and scoffed at by viewers in his performance from Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. He was welcomed back with open arms in Kenobi, even if the use of his character was pretty ridiculous, via flashbacks that didn't really have any purpose in the story. In Ahsoka, however, his inclusion is much more central and integral to the plot. Anakin teaches Ahsoka a lesson in the world between worlds, a sort of afterlife hangout spot for Force ghosts, which is kind of everything and nothing at the same time. It's very confusing. We're treated to flashbacks of a few battles of Anakin and Ahsoka during the Clone Wars from years past. Anakin and Ahsoka duke it out a little, and he leaves her with the decision to live. Listen, the dialogue on the show, I will admit, is not the greatest. In my opinion, it's just a bit flat, dry, and generic, almost robotic sometimes. But this is something that, funnily enough, Dave Filoni inherited from George Lucas himself. In A New Hope, Luke Skywalker's whining all the time, and he's kind of a sissy in my opinion.
Take these two over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
You can waste time with your friends when your chores are done. Now, come on, get to it.
All right, come on.
And some scenes in the original trilogy probably play out a little funnier than they're meant to.
That's impossible!
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Anakin, if I'm being honest, doesn't make the turn from Jedi Knight to Darth Vader in the most human and realistic way.
They're dead. Every single one of them.
And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them!
Both Dave Filoni and George Lucas are visionaries. Men that imagine these incredible and creative ideas, even if they don't execute them in the best way possible. This is made clear by the fact that The Empire Strikes Back is often considered to be one of the best Star Wars movies, and George Lucas didn't direct it due to problems with the Lucasfilm company at the time. Lucas came up with the ideas, but another director stepped in and executed those ideas in a way that he saw fit. That doesn't mean that Lucas and Filoni are bad directors by any means. They're obviously extremely talented on their own, but sometimes it seems that they maybe just need a little help. Nevertheless, the ideas in the prequels and Ahsoka are so meaningful and powerful that I'm willing to overlook any fumbles that were made in the execution itself. Anakin is arguably the main character of the Star Wars saga, and he directly relates to Ahsoka, so it makes sense that he would have at least a decent sizable role in the show. Anakin is the chosen one, the liberator of this galaxy destined to bring balance to the Force. In a sweeping mythological tale as old as time, Anakin was a slave who lost his mother and was indoctrinated into a Jedi Order that was way past its prime. It was far from what it used to be. Instead of being keepers of the peace, the Jedi were warriors, soldiers that were fighting in a war that they were losing. And in good old-fashioned destiny, they probably were supposed to lose. In fact, Anakin was the very thing that tipped the scales to give the victory to the Sith, but also the very thing that destroyed the Sith years later. He didn't grow up in the Order, he came from the outside, so therefore he was able to see the flaws. He was much different from the other Jedi, and he felt it. Not just because he was the chosen one, but because he carried with him the burden of living as a slave for 9 years of his life. Then, in Attack of the Clones, his mom died. Well, after becoming a Jedi, what he believed to be the most powerful beings in the galaxy, he was powerless against death. He never let go of his mom. Anakin's burden of guilt got much heavier. Did he even belong in the Order? The other Masters didn't seem to think so. Padme, the only person in his life who really understood him, really believed in him, and saw him for who he was all of a sudden thrown into immense danger. Anakin was tormented by visions and dreams of her death. Could he really lose to the ice-cold grip of death again? Anakin clutched onto Padme so tightly, just as tight as the guilt of losing his mother and his troubled past. He couldn't let go. Palpatine convinced Anakin of another path, a darker path. Anakin was so confused and misguided that he made a mistake. He killed Mace Windu in a moment of weakness and vulnerability. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Anakin caved, and in his feelings of guilt and regret, he decided that he wasn't a Jedi. He couldn't be, not with his past. And that was his mistake. He couldn't let go. That is why he became Darth Vader. Anakin lost to death one final time. Even in his newfound power, he couldn't save Padme. After she died, so did Anakin. He gave up. The greatest scene in Kenobi is when Anakin says to Obi-Wan,
I am not your failure,
Obi-Wan.
You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
the Jedi failed Anakin, no doubt, but he ultimately failed himself. He couldn't let go. He was trapped by his own guilt and pain. Darth Vader committed unspeakable, terrible, horrible acts of violence and war, killing countless innocent lives and spreading unimaginable grief throughout the galaxy. He was so focused on what he lost that he forgot who he was. It took Anakin's son, Luke, to show him that the battle between light and dark is never lost in any person. There's always hope. Anakin watched as his son, Luke, lay writhing in pain, slowly being killed by the person who promised Anakin the gift of life. He watched his death approach the final person who saw him for who he really was, who really believed in him. But this time it was different. This time he held the power to stop it. And this time he chose life. He cast off all of his guilt, all of his mistakes, all of his pain, and accomplished what he never dreamed he would be capable of. He prevented death from someone he loved. And now it came for him. But that slave boy from Tatooine wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready for death. He had fulfilled his destiny and unlocked his potential. He walked the line of both the light and the dark, and mastered them both. Luke pleaded with his father to let Luke save him, but Anakin replied,
You already have, Luke. You were right. You were right about me.
Anakin was saved. Anakin was free. And for the first time in his life, he let go. Ahsoka faced some of these same demons at the beginning of the show. She abandoned the Jedi Order, just gave it all up, and freely ran away. She didn't believe she was a Jedi. I mean, she didn't even complete her training. So when Sabine came asking to train under Ahsoka, she clung to this guilt. How could she train Sabine after failing the Jedi Order and, most importantly, her master? She wondered if, had she stayed on the Order, Anakin would ever become Darth Vader. Ahsoka couldn't let go. It wasn't until she herself was caught in the inescapable grip of death that she was faced with Anakin again. He had seen it all. The light, the dark, the good, the bad, the really good, the really bad. Anakin had one final lesson for Ahsoka. Switching between the light and dark at will, Anakin dueled Ahsoka as both a Jedi Knight and a vicious vindicator, to teach her that both are a part of who she is. She's not one or the other, and the choice is always hers. Anakin put her in a position where she was forced to choose, live or die. Lately, she was focusing on what she'd lost rather than who she was. Ahsoka chose to live. And after the season finale, where Thrawn escaped and Ahsoka and Sabine are stranded in this other galaxy, Anakin stands looking on, pleased. Because some might say that Ahsoka lost that battle. She could just give up and accept defeat, but now she knows what he knows. There's always hope. And Ahsoka isn't done fighting. That's what the show is really about. Not just the completion of Anakin Skywalker, completion of Ahsoka, manifesting what her master took his entire life to learn. She has another chance. So there you have it. There is my thoughts on Ahsoka, the deep philosophical message of the show, what the show is really trying to say, and the main message of Anakin Skywalker, of Star Wars itself. You know, it's all encapsulated in there. And like I said before, you know, the execution between Dave Filoni and George Lucas, you know, they may not execute all their ideas the best, but the ideas themselves are pretty fantastic. I mean, this stuff of light and dark, good and bad, you know, it is just some of the greatest stuff ever put to screen, and these ideas that are wrapped in here are tapping into stuff that's so magical and so awesome. If you enjoyed this video, again, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You know the drill if you want to, but if you don't, then again, that's fine. Leave your comment down below on what you think of all of this, and Anakin and Ahsoka and light and dark, and we got really deep today. And ultimately, I hope you're reminded that teenagers can think a little deeply too, because I'm Eli Hollingsworth, 16 years old, and this video was brought to you by me and all of my original thoughts written down on pen and paper. So if you want to see another video by me, just click right here on my face to see that. I know you'll like it because YouTube recommended it to you. And without further ado, may the Force be with you always.